my question is, what is this class about? What was it born of? My understanding is that it was born of this desire to do something about the polarized nature of our political situation in
And
the
what
US.
I'm saying, and what I'm saying is, yes, that the class is an outgrowth of the project of making, of using focusing for community empowerment. And we've been doing that in various ways for a couple of years, maybe 2.5 years. And this is the first online training that we've done. But the immediate impulse was, let's use focusing to make this situation better.
Right, and you had that impulse in 2016.
Yes.
But then also very recently.
Yes, absolutely. But then I want to say, but the other side of it is that it's an outgrowth of the work of making focusing, seeing how focusing is also a relational experience, both with partnerships and in therapy and now in communities. So it's a movement of seeing, how does a group use focusing? How does a community use focusing? How could a whole project of whatever project we're doing, how can it be made possible and better with focusing? And so it's not just, oh, I have to do something about the polarization. It's also, there's this amazing thing that we have here that people are dying from not having. Organizations are falling apart. Projects are failing. People are lonely and isolated and disconnected, and we have something that we can use to bring community together. Does that answer the question?
It does. It answers the question that, and the answer that I'm getting is that you want focusing to be used to bring communities together and to have this relational focusing dialogue, and that makes perfect sense. You know, I was also thinking there was this very specific feeling of the polarization politically in the United States. Not everybody in this group is from the United States, and so there. You know, I can't ask Derek who he voted for in this last election. We say, well, you know, and so, but there is a really terrible situation, you know, of a huge deficit of understanding. Like, you know, I mean, I go into my I'm at work, you know, and I just say, like, but why? Why did they vote for Trump? And, you know, I get various answers. They didn't vote for Trump, but like, people are thinking, you know, about why their mother might have, or
yes.
Just to say, Monica, around that piece as well, I think it's very important to hold the realization, and I think this is where Jean's philosophy comes in really well around the focusing, that people may have chosen to vote for whichever side they wished to vote for, but that's just an aspect and a part of the person. The person is also way more than all of that. And what's the more story that's underneath that person and their lived experiences that may have shaped them in their life to reach that point, to make that vote. Because we've had many swings and roundabouts in Ireland over the years, and our troubles and the violence and then the peace process and that whole journey. But it's just an aspect and a part of that person that chooses at a given point to vote this direction or that direction. But the person is also way more than all of that.
Yeah, understood. I mean, I have friends in Indiana who, you know, who voted for Trump because they their whole life story is that they need a job, you know. It's really basic, you know, and that is so understandable. You know, it's like, I'm a man, I need a job. I don't want to work lugging boxes in the back of Amazon. I want like a real job, a man job, you know. And it's just, it's heart-wrenching, you know. And so, you know, whatever political party.
And that also is a reflection of the whole system. It's not just a reflection on a part of the system, it's the whole, because even in Ireland, we were so out of kilt with the Northern Ireland violence and the peace, you know, and then there's the peace process and the journey of it. But it had to start by somebody reaching out and beginning to listen and start the process of listening, that what is going on here? What has allowed this to develop? The people have felt that they've had no other choice but this choice. And that also, and there's a political ownership by all sides of that, not just one side, all sides, because that's what led to the violence in Ireland. And equally what led to the peace was all sides coming together to actually own their contribution to it, but also try and come up with the solution towards it. And it happened through that listening and desire that we can't keep going like this. We just cannot keep going like this.
Right. Well, I mean, and that's where we're at, I think, in the United States, is that
we were fortunate enough at that time, probably maybe the stars were looking down a little bit on us as well, that there was political leaders that had the courage to take the risk on all sides and say, right, we've got to do something different. And that's the dimension that really helped it, because there was a desire on all sides to try and do it, because it was just too much. And I think that's the challenge ahead for IE in America, is all sides trying to, you know, you often hear about, you know, this, you know, you hear about in the Senate and bipartisan, but, you know, the bipartisanship and working together. And that's the only way you're going to find a way forward, is for all sides to begin to listen and begin to work together and do it slowly. But there's something wrong when some part of society is left behind. That's never okay in any country. And that's what's happening across the world. It's still happening in Ireland. It's not perfect. We still have the breakdowns of, and the peace process, the government in Northern Ireland gets suspended and they start round and they start talking and they get back together again. There's elements of Ireland, even in the Republic of Ireland, that people are left behind. The new phenomenon of homeless families in Ireland. I started out 30 years ago working in my profession, and it was homeless boys and children on the streets. Now we've homeless families. Like it's always those cycles in society that evolve and keep coming. And that's a reflection of the whole political system and the whole of our structures. And that's the challenge. That's the really difficult challenge, is not to lose hope in the middle of that and to keep chipping away at it. That's the radical challenge of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm hearing you say that people feel left behind, and that's why they possibly rise up and
in Ireland here, we had the seismic shift in Ireland, where the Republican Party that was in opposition almost passed out our main parties in the last election, because people felt so left behind economically here in Ireland recently. That people just felt, the middle group in Ireland felt, we're paying for everything, we're getting very little out of it, we've had enough of the mainstay parties, and went out in their droves to vote for them. Now, what did the main parties do and another small party? They came together to keep them out. Now, what will happen in the next election is the Irish people will go out in their droves and vote for the party that they originally wanted in, that didn't get their chance, and they'll surpass them. And it's coming because they're gone way ahead in the polls, because people's voice was not heard. See, and that's what's going on in so many political systems across the world. It's fascinating area to look at.
Well, it's fascinating and absolutely awful. You know?
Yeah, but that's the complexity of it. It's real complex stuff.
Right, but we have to have those stories. You know, it's like, if we don't get the stories of what is so compelling that you have to go this way. If we get that story, you know, it's something that can in fact touch our hearts. Or you know, if we don't get the story, there's a possibility that there isn't one, you know, maybe there isn't a story. Maybe it's just more like, I want a bigger financial portfolio. I'm afraid.
The other side of it as well is, if you get it too, and you understand the brokenness and the pain of people, your lens will change to how you see and understand why they voted and put the position they did, because they came from a deep human need. It wasn't just people think this through. People work this through in their own process. Here in Ireland, it's fascinating to listen to what drove people in this cycle of this election to turn this way. And it always comes back to the human need.
I just want to say we've sort of jumped in here head first, because we're all so eager to see how our conversation is going to be. Anybody else have any hello greetings or ways of entering? I see people beginning to put their cameras on, and it's so nice to see everybody. Your little teeny boxes for me tonight, but it's still glorious to see you.
I just want to say, every day that passes that we come together, there's something that grows in me that just feel like I'm being held. And I want to share that I haven't been feeling 100% health-wise. And somehow the excitement of this gathering propped me up to come in. And as soon as I came in, everybody was engaging such a rich and wonderful discussion that I was just like, you know, like a kid in a candy shop, just like, and deep bows of gratitude and appreciation for what is being not created, because it's already exists, but what's unfolding right now in this group, and that each of us is an integral part and a great contribution to whatever it is that we're doing together. And I know that because of how this conversation was going. Like this conversation was like, and so welcome. I am so excited that this is our like third, fourth meeting. And it feels like we've been meeting already for a very long time. And so it's the wisdom that's collected here that for me feels that way. Thank you.
And I want to thank Monica for starting that conversation with her question about how did this project start and what was at the heart of it there, and this idea of us desperately needing each other's stories.
For myself, not actually knowing anybody in the group and coming in and sort of having a unpleasant experience at the beginning with around our election and the feelings around that. And it helps me to at least pick a couple of people that I resonate with, you know, to have some kind of feeling of safety. No, I need to build a bed of safety for myself to then be able to reach out to people who I might feel like, oh God, you know, I'm not sure how this is going to go, how I'm going to feel.
Can I jump in, Monica?
Please, Isabel.
Not jump in like to say something to you, but to share something about my own experience. The edge of this work, it's for me to really sit in the discomfort of the comfort of meeting with someone that I'm uncomfortable with. I don't know if it makes sense, but for me to be able to sit in the discomfort of the comfort of sitting with someone that I'm uncomfortable with, that's where the edge is for me. I am great at being around people who I get along, I have a relationship with. I have throbs of those. I have millions of followers, like people say, right? And I am great in that space. And for me, my edge, my place where I want to grow and nurture, it's the capability and the ability to sit at the table with people who otherwise I would not have even thought about. and not just to sit, but to break bread and to be in conversation and in communion with that person.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where my edge has been in this work, and sitting in these meetings for the last, seems like since ever. And what I found for myself is that I have been given the gift of connecting with people who I didn't see as a possibility of the sameness in the us. I only was able to see the differences in the individual, but not the community. And so that's what the gift has been for me. And it's been very uncomfortable, but I sat with that. And so not to you, it's not your recipe, it's not your medicine, but it's my experience. And I don't know if it would serve you.
Okay, I appreciate your reflection, Isabel, and as I was saying, that I certainly agree about that edge, and I said that I believe that's where the meat of the work is. But what I was saying, what I would like to try again, I'll try again. I don't know you. I didn't trust you. I don't know the teacher. I didn't have any level of trust. And so I just wanted to build some sense of trust before getting into that meat. That's all.
Yes, that's a totally legitimate desire. Absolutely. One of the reasons that we're doing partnerships the way we are is that we're letting it be arbitrary. But it might be good. I think that Susan would be willing to do a session with you to begin with and get you into the flow of it. And then you might be able to, feel more comfortable just allowing the computer to make the decisions about who's partnering with who. But I want to I want to move on to the listening, because it is such an important subject, such a fundamental subject that will be, it will be our heartbeat throughout this training, but we're taking it on tonight in a very complex way. And so if it feels right to people, I'd like to jump into that so that we have time for the conversation about that. Monica, do you feel completed enough for us to move on to the teaching?
No.
Tell me what you need to be heard, because this is exactly what we want, right?
Right.
Is this idea of really feeling heard. And what I said didn't do it for you.
Yeah, no. I'm a smart chick. I know that our edges are to be with people that we don't feel comfortable with. I'm just saying, as a focusing group, for me, jumping into it, I think maybe some of the people knew nobody at all, and I think Isabel knows you, Lynn.
Yes.
There's a trust. It's like, if I knew you, Lynn, as I know you now, rather than 20 minutes ago, I know you better now than I did 20 minutes ago.
You certainly do.
I have a level of trust with you now that I didn't have 20 minutes ago. And, at the beginning of the class, it came in with, and it's sort of an explosion, certainly for me, and I think for other people as well, very, very difficult feelings. And I didn't know you as a teacher, Lynn, and I'm thinking, who is this woman even sane? Is she happy? Does she know what she's doing? Does she have any idea how the terror and the sort of the realness and the darkness of what is inside, and that how we have to, you know, come to grips with that and be honest about it, you know. So I'm just saying, I'm simply trying to, for myself, create a safe space. Look, I'm already scared.
Yes, yes, yes.
Like,
okay.
Can I just have a little bit of safety first?
Yes,
please?
yes, yes. Absolutely.
To
Absolutely.
get to know even just a few people
yes, yes.
first.
Absolutely, absolutely. So does everybody see there how I missed in my listening? Here I'm trying to teach listening, how I missed, you know, the essence of what Monica was saying. And I missed Monica, that I was answering sort of literally rather than the feeling. And Monica, you were so persistent about, no, this is what I need to be heard. And then I really got it in my chest. And maybe you people did too, that when you said it's terrifying with all of these feelings about the election and the situation in the world, to come into a place where I don't know anybody, and Lynn could be a maniac. She could be crazy. You know, what is she doing bringing these people together? How can I trust it? And of course, and then when you said, all I'm saying is that I need a little bit of space and time to get to know a few people so I feel safe. I really got the essence of what you were saying in a way that I got you. I thought, oh yes, I could feel an inner Monica. And that's what we need in the listening, to really feel the other person. It was as if these strange people, the strange group is throwing you in on the deep side of the pool without any preparation, without any swimming partners, just tossing you in. And you agree that that's the essence of the work, but you don't start like that, just throwing people into the deep end of the pool. And what you wanted is something so human, just a little time and space to feel trust, to feel like there are some people that you know that are trustable and allies in this very difficult project that we're taking on. Incredibly difficult. I mean, we're taking on a project that has stymied most of the United States, if not other parts of the world. Does that feel, Monica, like I got it?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Lynn. Mm-hmm.
Lynn, may I say something quickly?
Please, please.
I just want to reflect, if I may, something from Monica, and that I also was just worried was missed. I want to say a really important part of focusing is not just listening outside, but listening inside, and how much courage there is to honor that. Hey, you're asking me to do something. I'm a smart chick. I want to comply. I'm still here. However, I'm telling you, I don't feel safe. And, you know, or exactly what's being said, but how I think also this is a place, and focusing is a place to really honor what's coming inside. And if something doesn't feel quite right, to have the courage to speak to it, and for us to help find a way that does feel just right and does feel safe, because it needs to feel safe to listen and to be heard and to step in to any part of the water.
What a wonderful point that is, Rachel, on the level of course, focusing is based on listening to yourself first, or a prime need, and listening to the other. And that was something that Monica was getting at, that you picked up the underneath of what Monica was saying. And it's listening is about all of those strands that the person might not have spelled out, but are there, the point that the person is trying to make, and all of the complexity of that point. And you were picking up on something that was very, very important in Monica's message.
I would like to say something. It's Jane.
Go ahead. Hi, Jane.
Hi. So it's just you don't know me, Monica, so you may not trust anything I say, and that's understandable. But I do know Susan Deisroth very well for years, and I would assure you that she is one of the kindest, gentlest, best listeners there is in the world, and that you will feel safe with her as a teacher. So I don't know if that helps, because you don't know me, but and I'm new here too. So
Jane, your response is so heartfelt and really wanting to reach out to Monica and to make her feel safer. And that's so much our impulse when we really hear the person, is that we want to reach out and we want to make it better, or we want to make it safer, or we want to offer something. And that's such a human, important response. And I think that kind of response can be taken in after the message is understood. That if you had said that first, then it might not have had the same impact as you're saying it now, after Monica feels really heard. I have so many hats here. One of the hats that I have tonight is to give you the foundation of focusing oriented listening. And in terms of focusing oriented listening, it's to really get the person not to offer them something yet, not to try to solve it, not to try to fix it. And so the little but that you heard in there is that but. And there's a but to the but. But I think that when the person feels heard, then offering something can be very important and useful. Does anybody have anything to say about that?
Hi, Miko here. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Miko.
I'm just putting forward, Monica, I don't know if you know, but I'm your partner I'm currently your scheduled partner, but I'm completely open to, what feels comfortable. So I imagine that we can connect via email or phone to kind of figure that out. But just naming that, I was just kind of thinking of that as we were having this conversation. So.
I'm kind of imagining myself in the position of say focusing partnership, and then having a particular something to say or to say or to disclose, and I don't know the person, and so I'm imagining that for myself, what would be valuable is if I'm as the focuser, if I'm experiencing some fear while I'm sort of inside deciding about what to say, then what might be helpful to me in being able to feel some safety would be to acknowledge and state, right at this particular moment, I'm experiencing some fear, in relationship to, speaking and more. And then hopefully, my focusing partner would be able to both hear that and be hear that and be present and accepting and you know, and reflecting of that. For me, that would help for me to start feeling, you know, safer around saying that or something like that. So I'm just adding that part in terms of, you know, in terms of feeling safe. There can be the feeling safer with the other, and how, but it's also, feeling safe about what the other may say, and also feeling, you know, each of our fears has each of our fears has their own story, and it might also just be useful. Might find it useful to be able to acknowledge the fear and go, oh, well, what's that fear of?
Well, I think you're bringing us right into the experience there when you say that, of imagining ourselves and many of us having the experience of not feeling safe to say what we want to say, or to focus with someone, and then being able to say that you're feeling afraid, that you're feeling unsafe, is that freedom to say whatever is there, and to expect that the person, that the partner, is going to be able to hear that and say, oh, it's a certain kind of unsafe, it's a fear, it's unknown, and to help you spell out what that fear is, not to hide it or surpass it. And that's such an important point about always the feeling in the moment, the relational feeling in the moment comes first. Whether you're feeling, if you're feeling unsafe with someone, to say, I'm feeling scared, I'm feeling unsafe, or if you're feeling touched by someone, to say, I feel touched by that. Whatever it is that you're feeling in relation comes first. And we can expect the partner to reflect that, to hear it. But if the partner doesn't do that, doesn't know how to do it, we can say, just say that back to me. Just give me a moment to see where that goes. So the focuser is always in charge in a focusing partnership, to say what you need, how you need it. Maybe you need the person to just be quiet and not say anything.
I have a question, Lynn. I understand, like, maybe we're talking about focusing conversations, but like the way I see it now is like I'm in charge of my feelings and my triggers. There's a part of me that's like, okay, well, I just want to sit with my own triggers and see what's causing that. Like, do I need to express that to the other person? Because it's like, you know, I mean, I know naming it like kind of creates an opening, but at the same time, like sometimes it's like, maybe I just need to look at like what's causing me to feel this way, and like take self-responsibility for that, and like sit with it on my own versus naming it to another person. Because like, I guess maybe it's the fear that, you know, majority of the people can't handle like the naming of these emotions.
So what you're saying, Abby, is that sometimes if you're feeling unsafe with someone, to say that you're feeling unsafe with them would cause more problems than you started out with. That it might be better to deal with that inside yourself. And I wasn't thinking actually of saying I feel unsafe with you, so and so, but just to really look at the bodily feeling of unsafe and what kind of unsafe it is. But I see very much what you mean, Abby. Am I getting your point right?
Yeah, because I guess like my point is like sometimes, like, how do we differentiate? Like, because it's always 200%, like 100% my self-responsibility that I'm feeling this way, because I'm in control of how I feel. And then it's the 100% from the other person that's causing this. So like, at which point do I decide to reveal, like, because sometimes it's got nothing to do with the other person. It's like what's happening inside of me, right? That's what I'm trying to say. I think that's just like something I'm trying to figure out, like in general, which this conversation has triggered.
I love what you said about it's 100% you and it's 100% the other person, and it's the 100% also the 100% of this combination, right, of this particular chemistry between the two people.
I'd like to comment.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm pushing this scenario a little bit further and saying, okay, so I'm the companion who has just heard that the person I'm companioning, the focuser, is uncomfortable, is afraid.
Right.
So what are my options for responding to that? What do I say? Instinctively, I think what I would say is maybe we should just take a moment and reflect on how might I be with you in a way that would lessen your fear. But maybe there's responses as well. But I for me, instinctively, I would be saying, I'm hearing that you're really afraid in this situation. So how might I be with you in a way that might lessen that fear a little bit? Probably won't take it away, but how can I be with you in a way that would lessen that fear?
It's a beautiful response, Joe. It reminds me of Jean saying that our job is to be the interaction that will make something better. And you're saying, how can I be with you that will help the fear a little bit?
Right.
Yeah.
Or there may be some other, I'd love to hear some other responses. I mean, it's
yes.
Fun.
What I'm thinking about is if someone is saying that, I guess in the process of them focusing, they're the focuser and I'm the listener, and they're saying, I'm noticing some fear around focusing here with you, that since it's the focuser who is guiding the process, saying, reflecting that back and checking this to make sure that reflection is resonant, and then saying, so just to clarify, are you wanting to continue focusing through what you're feeling, or is there something that you kind of want to talk about as far as us continuing with this, with you feeling uncomfortable, just kind of giving them that agency rather than even just like posing a question of, maybe we should do this, or maybe we should try this, giving them the option of, or not giving them the option, but saying, are you wanting to continue with focusing through this, and are you just naming this, or is there some type of adjustment that you feel like it would be helpful for us to make here? But I'm saying that, but I also have a question too.
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess something that I'm sitting with that I just feel confused by is just the focusing dynamic in general. So my experience of, the focusing partnership and just kind of focusing conversation one-on-one is that one person is a focuser, one person's a listener, and that is the case for the duration of the time, right?
Yes.
But the dynamic within community that I'm kind of struggling with is, what are the boundaries of that? Each time someone says something, should someone be reflecting it back to make sure there's clear resonance and understanding? Like how do we and I think we talked about this, Lynn, maybe, but like, how do you switch between people? How do you be with yourself? And usually the dynamic is you're focused on one person. So just, I think I'm wondering, what are the boundaries around that? And like, how do you switch between being oriented which way?
Yes. That's that's what we're going to find out. And by July, we'll have more to say about that. And that's actually, what we're trying to do tonight is to say some things about listening to the individual, some of the skills and the deep understandings of listening to the individual, and then how is that translated into community? And it's a much messier process in a group, right? And that's why I'm very excited for us to really look at what we did last time and how we did that through the messiness of the process. It's not going to be the way that it is when you're teaching FOT, like in the beautiful course that you're taking with Charlotte. It will be a much looser, messier process of somebody needs to be listening to the individual. And when Monica first started speaking and I wasn't listening deeply, that's not going to go anywhere for the whole group. So there needs to be, what I think of is that there needs to be a reservoir of focusing attitude and real listening for each individual. It doesn't mean that everybody is on that page at that moment. Somebody else may be in a different place. But as long as there's enough of that focusing attitude and listening, and as Monica says, enough people that she feels that she can trust, that she feels safe with, then other people's reactions and thoughts and feelings and where they take it will take the group conversation in a further direction, sort of like all of the parts of the person.
I think the unfolding of the boundaries and the working within and stepping out of the boundaries is actually happening as we're sharing, as the weeks are going on. I think it's really evident, and I think presence is really important.
Yeah.
Presence is fundamental for me. And presence is your whole being present before you step into the realm of even listening. Your presence holds an essence to hold the other individual before a word is ever uttered. And it's even very hard to describe that presence, because that presence holds an atmosphere. And that atmosphere, there can be a presence of welcoming and nurturing whatever the person is struggling or unfolding with, or whatever joy or unexpected delight that may be going on, because we have both of those dimensions within the core of our being. And I think the piece that you're saying that is really, really important, Lynn, is that someone needs to hold enough of that presence in community and in groups to facilitate the opening of this to grow more and more. And I see, when I step into the classroom of pupils and hold that presence, you'll find as the weeks go on, the pupils begin to hold it among themselves and they become kind neighbors to each other in the classroom. And it begins to evolve and it begins to grow and they begin to listen and it begins to shape in a way that's organic and natural.
And I love the way you're saying that that's unfolding here. And there are more and more of us that are holding that space of the presence.
And I have to say, one of the difficulties for me with all of this is when I do begin to speak up, I feel like I have to make an effort. And I'm always worrying, am I interrupting someone? Is it not the time? But if I don't speak, then someone, so there's a kind of discomfort in general that I'm not quite sure how that works in this kind of a setting. Derek's comment about presence, and we always sort of in focusing work begin there, taking a few minutes. And I have found that in groups, beginning to take, we meet and we take the first 3-4 minutes of setting intention and breathing and letting go of the rest of the day and coming here. And then a group presence, as we have our individual presence comes, something of a larger nature also forms. And that feels critical. What is the container that we are forming here?
Yes. What is the container? And
what is
how
the intention, the container, the safety there? How does one speak up and how do we make room for each other? What are the forms to do that? Miko's comment and Joe's comment about how to respond when Abby was saying, being afraid. For me, the simplest focusing training I had was both with Mary and Anne Weiser Cornell, to be able to respond just like you were saying, Lynn, before you offer something to someone else, that kind of acknowledging of the through listening, the listening and the acknowledging of, there is something, you're noticing that there's something in you that is feeling frightened or unsafe. And that simple statement is such a acknowledging of just what the other is saying, and the help and the supporting the other to be with themselves as well as you to be with them. And then to see what emerges from there. The stuff of safety feels so delicate. I mean, I've known Monica I've done focusing for 20 years, and I've worked with 20 years, something like that, almost. I still, I'm in a group like this, I don't feel safe. And I know some people, but I'm not safe until I really feel the holding of what we are creating together. There's lots of things I will not say in this group.
Thank you so much, Ruth. That's so helpful. And it reminds me that we didn't start today. We sort of just, the conversation just, was so ready to go that we didn't start with breathing together, with settling into our bodies, with our intention to be open and receptive, with the listening to the self that comes with being embodied and then enables us to listen to the other, and reminding us that initial setting the stage for presence is so important. It's very appreciated, Ruth.
You're welcome. Thank you for appreciating that. Thank you.
I was planning to quote you tonight because in this exploration of listening to the individual and listening to the conversation, you had pointed out how each of us has a unique individual piece of the whole of the conversation, just like the parts of ourselves have unique voices that make the whole of our inner democracy.
I really wanted to ask something in relationship to what we were talking about earlier today, when you were talking about listening to the underneath, and if you can say more about that.
I think that the way that focusing began was Jean's noticing with Carl Rogers, how when you deeply listen to somebody, whoever it is becomes beautiful. Listening makes the person, their deeper selves, makes the person beautiful. And then so much of Jean's philosophy was around spelling out that mystery. Why is it that if you listen to the underneath, to the larger self, to the person, rather than to what they're just saying, the content of what they're saying, they become beautiful? Because the life force is then given a chance to open out, to grow. And the conversation develops in these little steps. And there's something so exciting about that. And when you're listening to the underneath, you're listening with your gut, not just with your head, and you're listening to the other person's deeper self, inner self, what they're trying to get at. Because a person isn't a static thing. A person is always a becoming. And you're listening to the becoming. Where are they going? What are they trying for? What are their needs? What in them is trying to find more life? So the motto that I think we've talked about before that we're listening to understand, not to reply. That motto is so important. We're listening not to counter or to give our own view, but we're listening to understand. I want to just bring in a famous Kohut, a famous psychology theorist, who said, what's healing is for the person to feel deeply understood. That's healing. And we want this healing process. But now I want to say something further, and that's that with a focusing understanding, it isn't just that we're listening to understand, not to reply. We're listening to further what the person is trying to say, what the person is trying to get at. We're listening to further that person. So we're midwives. We're not just understanding it, but we're helping give birth to what's in the person that wants expression, that is bursting with life and needs that vehicle of connection in order to be furthered. And that's so exciting. It's so exciting to listen in that way, to be part of this becoming, to be the midwife of what the person is trying to get at. So we're not just listening to the ideas that the person is saying, or to their politics, or to their understandings. We're listening to them and what that means to them, the felt meaning of all of that. Does that explanation help, Isabel?
It does, and I appreciate that, because I think that, when you talk about what's unique about this interaction and the interaction, and also this piece around becoming a living presence, and I'm just so like curious about all that.
Listening is quite daring and courageous, because you have to be willing to be cooked. You're changed when you listen to someone. You're sitting down in the fire and letting the words reach you in the chest. I am aware of the time, and we wanted to have just a very brief demonstration with Susan, just listening in the focusing kind of way.
Jim, are you here?
Right, I'm right next to you, although maybe not on your screen.
When you talk, then you spring for. Shall
Sure.
we sit down in the fire?
So let me start by saying that I always find all these things very difficult. And what I find difficult about them is the relationships. Relationships are what make it hard. So often when I focus, I'll just go into my body and kind of make the other person disappear, not completely, because who wants to feel abandoned, but enough so that the relationship is in the background. And I think that I'm doing it wrong. I think that, not that there is a wrong. You can't do it wrong, but if there was a wrong, I would be doing it wrong. Because I think the relationship has to become primary, I think was the word Lynn used. Focusing without taking the relationship seriously enough is mistaken.
So Jim, I hear like two parts of you speaking. And the first one to me says, I want to be with myself and to connect with myself, so I know what I feel. And that's so hard to do when the other person is there. The relationship becomes so large. And then the other side, another Jim saying, that's That is the wrong way to do it. You have to, maybe I don't really have this. I didn't listen. I think I didn't listen.
I think you listened fine.
What's that?
I think
No,
you listened fine.
Having trouble with the second one where you're criticizing yourself and saying it's the relationship that's important. But there you said more, and I'm drawing a blank.
Well, I'm kind of evading it, and it's important not to evade it. Although I suppose if I need to evade it, trying to force it wouldn't be a good idea either.
Yeah.
Even though we're called force.
Even though we're called force. To force yourself to so-called relate to the other person doesn't feel quite right. Or you didn't say that. You said.
Yes, I did.
You said it doesn't feel quite right?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I could do that, but it wouldn't be the right thing to do because I wouldn't be relating to the difficulty. I'd be evading it.
Right. So the difficulty, if we were to get a little bit closer to what it is, how would you maybe put that into words? The difficulty. It's so hard.
Well, I could say all sorts of words, but I should wait and let some words come to me. The difficulty is not knowing what to expect. And when you don't know what to expect, often it's more comfortable to guess what to expect. And I usually guess something horrible.
It's more comfortable to guess because at least you'll know that you usually guess something horrible.
And horrible in this case would mean one of two things, either not understood or not taken seriously. And by two things, I mean three things. Or the third thing would be ignored or abandoned.
Either not understood or not taken seriously, or a really awful thing to be ignored, and that means to be abandoned.
That's correct.
Three awful possibilities. Not to be understood, be ignored, and not taken seriously.
Right. Now, for example, right now, I listened to you reflecting what I was saying, and the sense of it was right, but something didn't feel right about it. And it's hard for me to say what that is. But what it is you heard my words, and I think you understood the sense of them, but you were trying too hard, and you were concentrating on thinking about what I was saying. And for that reason, I felt some absence from you. And I felt like, well, she heard what I was saying, but I didn't feel like I was with her when she heard what I was saying.
Or I wasn't with you.
Right.
I think I was with my nervousness about
That's right.
wanting, knowing we have people watching and they're going to talk about what succeeded and what didn't. And I am having trouble listening. You're so right.
And I feel touched by that, I really feel heard.
I'm glad. I'm glad I heard.
I've known you for so long, and we've never had a conversation like this.
You never have.
No. Why should that be?
I don't know. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, the first thought is always that it's my fault.
That's my thought.
Just because everything is so complicated and there's always so much going on.
That's why. You know, my thought is if either one of us always thinks it's our fault, who would want to have a conversation like this, which is, you know, we don't know what's happening really. It's too risky, too dangerous.
Right. And yet, here we are risking it.
No? Feel there's something exciting.
Yes. But now I feel a little overwhelmed by it. Like, let's quit while I'm ahead.
I think we will have to soon.
Well, that's a relief.
Yeah. Maybe we could take a step back. Maybe this doesn't have to be perfect. So we could do it again.
Again, another time, you mean? Or again now?
I meant another time.
Right. Okay. Sure.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Susan.
Oh, let's all take a breath again, another breath. Ah, thank you both so much for risking that. If I were going to give this demo a name, I would call it Becoming a New Us. So what did people notice, or what moments? I think maybe the best thing to ask is, what moments touched you or did you feel?
I mean, what touched me was when I said that something was wrong and I risked being critical. It was listened to and responded to, honestly. Who does
so
that?
It touched, right. It touched you both that you were willing to take the risk, which was
Right.
big for you.
Yes.
Jim's face touched me. More than anything, his face just shifted for me. His eyes, too.
Well, I took the risk because it was you.
That touches me, too. We've known each other for how long?
I don't know, 10
10
years?
years. In a supervision group, but it hasn't been with this kind of intimacy and openness and delicacy.
I was very touched when Jim said, we've never had this kind of conversation before.
Yeah. I think that for me, that was sort of like the piece that touched me as well. That piece where there was I think this is something that I recall for some kind of something that Clara did. It was sort of like the coming together of two people and like seeing each other for the first time. That's what it felt like for me, like, and I was also touched by Jim's willingness and openness about how he felt when Susan was listening, that he didn't feel that he was hurt, but it wasn't like, oh, and you did something wrong. Like he was able to say, and this is the reason why I feel that way. And for Susan to then take that and make herself and show her own vulnerability. To me, that was like really beautiful. It was like some kind of harmonious dance or music playing at that moment.
You know, Isabel, after that point, I felt that the whole conversation, well, it changed. It became a conversation rather than focusing where I was the listener reflecting. I left that role and I became what Jim was. We were both having a conversation. Did anybody notice that?
Yeah. When Jim said he didn't feel heard, which was so risky, and I appreciate that. And you're just taking that so in, Susan, and being with, oh, I guess I'm with my nervousness. And people are watching, and it was just so present, honest, and it changed everything. Then the conversation went, as you were saying, Susan, it took another, it became something more.
Something different.
Yeah.
And I realized I was supposed to be the whatever companion, and we were having a heartfelt, focusing conversation. The roles were the same, not differentiated. That's never happened to me in a focusing, you know, where there's a focuser and whatever you want to call the other person. But, you know, it felt like there was not so much to protect after I had to agree with Jim. It was a relief.
Listening is to the person, not the role or not the content. And Jim was crying out for connection and for you. He kept saying, you kept saying, Jim, I want to focus with Susan, and the relationship is important and I'm struggling with that. And so you were being the interaction that was making it better. You were being that connection and being that authenticity and responding, not just by reflecting, but by responding by being the Susan that he needed you to be.
I saw a kind of a vulnerable kindness that in the way in which you, Jim, spoke that. And that, and I mean, you were speaking about something that was missing, and you also identified what was there. And I'm wondering whether or not that also helped you, Susan, to be able to take that in, not, you know, either not defensively or not sort of suffer an inner critic attack, and be honest in the way that you were. But I saw a gentleness as you were reaching out for something more, Jim.
I felt a gentleness in it. It wasn't harsh.
Jean talks about how it's not the saying, but it's the doing in the saying, what we're doing. And this conversation was not just what was said, but what Susan and Jim were doing, which was attending to the trouble, and the doing of being with yourself and being honest and really with the other. And Jim was able to speak your own truth, Jim, and at the same time be very present with Susan and gentle with Susan without giving yourself up. So in a way, the conversation was the development of this edge that you're working on.
I was just gonna share a kind of a reaction that I had watching. Thank you both for being vulnerable and doing that for the group. But I was just gonna share a kind of reaction that I was noticing within myself. So I've been focusing with Jim for like the past couple of weeks. So we had 2 focusing sessions, but was noticing in this particular exchange that I was feeling like love for Jim. And I was like, what is this? Like, and I don't mean to like to say it that way, but I mean, like, the nature of our relationship is that we focus twice together, where it's been this kind of mutual sharing, like, and what I was recognizing as the love for Jim was kind of coming up in the vulnerability, the authenticity, Jim's openness. And then recognizing, I think that piece that you mentioned, when you listen deeply to someone, whoever it is, becomes beautiful because I've had that listening relationship with him. And also, so recognizing that beauty in Jim in that moment, but also that sense of us being beautiful. Like we have this, and when we're both open and have that reciprocal relationship, there's a depth there, there's a beauty there, and just kind of love as that admiration of beauty coming forth.
I just want to add one thing though, which is that there's always this danger, which is after you come together like that, you want to hold on to it. And once you hold on to it and you don't want to mess it up, you're going to lose it.
It was such an authentic human shared experience and conversation that held such an openness towards each other. We had a lovely, tender compassion back and forth in that conversation. It just had all the nucleus there and a natural flow back and forth, but a flow of openly receiving each other's flow back and forth in that conversation. And it was like listening at one stage. I closed my eyes and it was like you were literally mirroring and dancing each other's movements back and forth towards each other. But it was that open flow of back and forth, with that lovely compassion and authenticity in that with each other. The risk to place out, how Jim placed out initially, and how Susan, you received and said, yeah, because I'm noticing all these parts in me and whatever. And it didn't block anything. It actually opened it more and more because it was so authentic. It was so real. Because this isn't a demonstration. This is actually real life. I know we call it a demonstration, but this actually is a real living, happening process in front of our eyes.
There's never a demonstration, right? It's always living.
I had heard, maybe misheard, I had heard that when Jim said, you heard me, I mean, you reflected my words, but you didn't hear me.
Mm.
And I thought Susan had said I was with my earnestness, but I guess from other people's reflections, it was with seriousness.
Nervousness.
I'm having trouble with that today. But even if it was earnestness or if it was nervousness, it works perfectly. I loved how serious she became. What I mean is everything slowed down then. And I think it opened, and it was literally like, this is why people like romantic comedies. I mean, they want to see, or romantic dramas, they want to see connection. They want to see intimacy. We're hungry. We could never get enough. We could never.
That's right. And so the beauty that Jean talks about is also this seeing the connection, and that we can never get enough of that.
And I love how Jim took care of himself like at every minute, and also said, well, now it's become complicated or it's become too much, which he had started with that as well. And I felt very discouraged when he said that, like, he's right, it's so difficult, it's so complicated. When he said it at the end, it was more like, this has been something, and I think I need a breather now. Let's take a breather. And it was just perfect.
So, all this experiments, everything is going really nicely. But what if you have somebody who doesn't know how to listen, or who could be judgmental with your focusing? And so that as the focuser, you're not feeling safe, but what do you do?
You mean, what would Susan do if Jim was judgmental of her?
Well, I'm thinking about us as we're going in our different partnerships, because we all have different levels of experience. So I'm just thinking about me personally, if I was with somebody who couldn't listen, or was defensive, or who knows what, because this is all new too. As a focuser, what would I do?
It feels like there's something that wants to come there. What would you do that you could take a moment to feel into? Like, what would you do? What will you do if you have somebody that can't listen, or that's judgmental, and you're the focuser? What will you do? But just give that a moment and see what arises in you.
I sort of look at that. That's probably one of my weaknesses. That if I'm doing something where I'm really feeling if I'm really with myself and I'm trusting this person and I'm not getting something back, I could see immediately I'm going to put up walls or something, or be defensive or angry or something. And it's sort of like all those things that are natural. So again, to bring my larger self to that is really challenging when you're feeling so vulnerable.
So I want us all to hold this question, because it's a big, big question for all of us, and we could sort of hold it together. You know, what will we do? And this is the big question of our training that we are hoping to discover. What can we do when we're not being listened to and we're vulnerable and someone is being judgmental, and we want so much to put up walls and to retreat or to be aggressive or something like that, and we want that larger self, but it's nowhere to be found? What can we do? Let's just breathe that, and that big, big question.
If something does come to me, is sort of the larger
Yes.
self. The larger self knows
Yeah.
that the other person has their own challenges, you know, so that the behavior is because there's something else going on in their life, and it has nothing to do with me. But again, I think back, you know, when Monica in the beginning of our whole session today, talking about feeling safe with someone that you don't know, you know, that resonated for me, and then thinking about going further with it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the larger self might remind you or say, you know, the person is struggling there, and it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. And that's their struggle. And that reassurance might help.
I guess I'm thinking of just the focusing partnership, since, you know, as a focuser, I'm the one who kind of is guiding the process. I would can I just say, you know, actually it's more helpful if you do this. And, you know, say, this is actually what I want. Can you do this? This is what I want you to do instead. Do that. And yeah, I feel like that's what my inclination is. And to be like, oh no, that's actually not with any taking offense to it, but saying this is how this process works. I tell you what's helpful for me. So what you're currently doing isn't helpful for me. So I'm going to tell you this is what is helpful for me.
We all might have different things, right? All different pieces of that, you know, all of the broken vessel, that story, all different pieces. And your piece would be to tell the listener what you need. It sort of reminds me of, you know, one of the things about having a good sexual relationship with somebody that you don't know well, is to be able to tell them, I need this, or not like that, do it like that. And that can be so helpful to reset things.
That consent piece is interesting. Yeah.
Right.
I try to help myself when I'm feeling threatened, and just be with the threatenedness, with that part, and calm it down and try to get a sense of what it's so threatened about.
I was just going to say, when that happens for me, I oftentimes try to slow down my inner pacing, because I want to react, or there's something that I just want to get out. But if I can really slow myself down on the inside and not just take a breath, but really, really get to a place of pacing myself differently, I find the next thing is always a movement forward. And I what Susan also said, just being with that part, you know, experiencing it, and being okay with what is there, instead of trying to, you know, make myself think I should be thinking something else, or just really, I think, as Jean also says, befriending that.
Right.
And that helps me continue to slow down, and then something can shift in the relational field, not just in myself.
Yes. So there's a couple of parts there to that, of the somatic part of really slowing down and re-entering your body. And then the part about befriending yourself, being the other person isn't listening to you well, so you listening to yourself well and being on its side of that it in yourself. And then that changes the relational field, because when you're listening well to yourself, you're paying attention to that self, then that's also in the interaction, that energy.
Absolutely. Something really energetically shifts. And I think I really saw that between Jim and Susan. There was a slowing down and there was a heartfulness that was there that I think we all felt, and it's so beautiful when that happens and it sort of emanates out to the whole group, because it's something we can all identify with, that wanting to be really listened to and being vulnerable and feeling held and met in a very particular way that meets a need.
Lynn's question is, what did Jim do? And what I saw Jim do was come into the session by saying, I really want you, Susan. I want you to hear me, to listen to me, to know me. And Susan got a little off because she got into her nervousness. And then Jim sort of took her face and said, no, you, Susan, I want you, you, not your professional, you. And then that coming together was so romantic, as Ina said, with the romantic drama, and then of course another woman has to jump in and say, but I love Jim too. I also love Jim, and I could also say, and I too love Jim. and Susan, and
I love Susan.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Even witnessing people seeing each other and hearing each other is profound.
I think what tickles me is Jim was like, I've known you for 10 years and I want more. That just tickled me. That's what I heard. So I felt it was so sweet.
You really like that. I want
I
more.
like that too. Like, I just want more.
That energy of the wanting is what we're after, right? There's all the self-criticism, and then Jim and Susan were both together in a kind of twinship of criticizing themselves, a tendency to criticize themselves. But that was acknowledged. But then the forward movement is the wanting. I want more, and Susan really wanting to meet Jim. I wonder if we could shift now for a moment and go back to our last session. And what I'm a segue there is that when Shakafe passionately cried out her feelings of wanting to be heard, and Joe received them with a heartfelt, we have to tell each other our stories, Joe said. That's the answer, and this should never happen again. There was this coming together in that moment, and I wondered, those of you who remember, or those of you who watched the recording, but if you didn't watch the recording, I would encourage you to do that. What you remember or watched or both from the conversation last time? What moved that conversation forward? And now we're looking at how conversations of the whole group have their own journey.
Well, I already spoke to that about my, I did listen to the whole meeting. And in that moment when Joe spoke, I felt like a huge love come from him. Joe, I felt a huge love come from you towards Shekofei. And, you know, just gorgeous. I mean, who doesn't want that? You know, just a beautiful, a wave of energy. And then said some words and then said, we need to make sure this never happens again. And, you know, maybe I totally misread those words, but it threw me off into a rage of what do you mean we have to make sure this never happens again? You know, maybe you didn't mean we have to make sure Shekofei's husband isn't taken away from her, you know, but that's what I thought, and I thought, well, how can you say that when we all had access to the information of that people of exceptional ability were also cut off, you know, that came down the pike. We knew that.
There was the feeling of the love, and that was sort of softening you, and who doesn't want that? And then there was a rage that came in you, like, I don't understand that, and how can you say that? And there were those dual feelings there at that moment. And we're not going to talk more about that right now, but I just want to get from everybody what that was, a moment there where the conversation moved forward and you were really sparked in two different ways.
I think for me, a moment was the moment from Joe when he saw reconnection and connection with Aina. And that felt really, it really resonated for me, because all my life, I'm always seeking like-minded people for fear of myself or being around others who are not like me. And so when he said that, it brought me back to how I go sometimes into a setting and I may be the only BIPOC. And me and my friend often say we bean counters, like we count how many others of us are there. And so when Joe said that, I saw myself in that moment, that I do that I seek that who is like me, and that comes for me from a place of wanting to feel safe and wanting to feel protected, and that and that I can be okay with that and not to shame myself because I feel that way sometimes. So thank you, Joe, because I saw a part of me in you, in that sort of like recognition.
Isabel, I thought that was also an example of how listening moves the conversation forward, because you were picking up something that I don't think a lot of other people were aware of, because you were resonating with it, and you were picking up on that implicit desire for connection and community that you were feeling deeply.
Derek used the word earlier, you know, we're dancing with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the dance it flows. And there are other times when you step on each other's feet. But the acceptance of that, and, you know, the more you dance, the better you get at it. So yeah, I can resonate with what Isabel said.
There was another moment when Clara, I felt, really tuned into the underneath. That's what we're trying to untangle here, is what is tuning into the underneath. When Clara said that Shakopee wasn't only standing for the right, the recognition of being happy about Biden winning, but that Shakopee was also so relieved because it felt endangering to her to have the Trump administration. And Shakopee hadn't said that exactly, but that's what was crying out in her, that Clara picked up on, and it felt like that somehow released something.
Speak to the point that about what Clara said, and then Ruth also said something about how personal the story became. I felt that gave a depth, whatever else Ruth said about that, and that Shakopee said something that, that showed, it touched her. It was the personal that where the passion was, and the relief that you could feel. She started to, at least I felt that there was relief in her body about being understood deeply.
And Shakopee felt very understood, responded to by Steve as well. But I don't remember what you said, Steve, but I remember Shakopee saying that she felt very responded to by you as well as by Joe.
It was above and beyond a position. That there's a sort of a life there.
What Jean would call an experiential world. There's a whole world in a person. And you're not just getting their views or you're getting a whole world of experience that you have to feel in your chest.
I just want to be sure that it's safe to hold different opinions. It's safe to stand in my own complexity. I don't feel that tonight. Didn't feel that listening over to the tape either. Especially knowing that others don't feel safe because of my presence. That's that terrifying, not belonging is a matter of life and death. I don't know if there's space here.
I think you were really able to say that so touchingly, that you don't know if you can be received in your complexity, and how terrifying it is to feel that other people or somebody doesn't feel safe with you, and that feeling of it, life and death, of not belonging.
Feeling the world becoming very small.
Becoming small in this us and them kind of way. Like I have to either be an us and everybody has to think alike, or I could be a them and then I won't belong and people won't feel safe with me. And that is an awful choice. I mean, that's a terrible, terrible choice.
For a larger group to become safe, we have to not be so absolutely certain about what we think we know. I'm not speaking about your internal experience, because that knowing, that's the real deal. But if you
have to be
the media, etc., facts, all that, there are questions. I remember, because I listened so carefully and was also present last time, Jane works in immigration, and she made a few comments at the end, and one little phrase that she included gave me breath, when she said, and it's not just that, this administration, she was bemoaning the immigration unfairness.
And that gave you a breath.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, she gets something that is important to me.
So one of the things we've been robbed of in this last 4 or 8, even more years, is nuance and complexity. And I'd like to stand for that.
I want to say that back, that you want to stand for the nuance, for the complexity. And you want this group and this larger group to be able to welcome your nuance and complexity. And there was something else you said that I really want to highlight, that we have to be willing to have a real focusing conversation in a group like this. We have to be willing to be not so certain of the things that we know. And it reminds me, actually, there's a philosopher, Hans Gadamer, who wrote about genuine conversation, and in a way that we're trying to have. And I'll send you his quotes, actually. But he says that you have to be willing to lay your prized assumptions at the altar of the conversation. And what he meant by that is not that you're wishy-washy and you don't believe the things you believe, and you don't have convictions and you don't have values and you just give it all up for the group. He didn't mean that at all. But he meant more like what Jean talks about when Jean says, I put nothing between me and the other. I have all my experiences, my convictions, my values, my skills. They're right there. I can always take them back up. But in that moment of the real listening, I have nothing between me and the other. Even my prized convictions and knowledge and facts and all of that, I put it right there next to me. And that's quite difficult, right? You have to have a lot of confidence that you can get yourself back, right? If you put yourself aside for the sake of the connection, to really take in the other person's universe and try it on to see what's under it, what's in it, what's the texture of it. Jean talks about the need to be on its side. And what he means by that, its side, well, he's talking there about the individual, but we're broadening it to the conversation. But what he means is that you're not on the side of what the person is saying. Maybe you passionately disagree with what the person is saying, but you're on its side. What's trying to come through that person? And you're on its side. What's trying to come through the conversation? Not the content, but the deeper life that's coming through it. And you have to put your assumptions aside in order to really be on its side. You're not giving them up, but you're just putting them down there. Does that make sense to people? It's certainly not easy to do. But I also want to say here that that's where the us comes in. Because of course we can't do that all the time. None of us can do that all the time. But if some people can't do it, and there's enough people that could do it in that moment, because maybe they aren't triggered as much, or maybe they're, or they can find something there, there's a large enough reservoir of receptivity, then it works. It's not like everybody has to be listening in that way all the time. We would never get that.
That speaks a little bit to the fact that part of what happened with Susan and Jim tonight, we should credit ourselves with.
Mhm.
with the container.
Absolutely. Yes, that's right. It's one, we are many people, but we are one interaction. There's
So
only one interaction here with the many people.
it's also about trust. Trust.
Mhm.
Trust.
Trust.
Trust in the human process. Trust in the connection. The trust in the not knowing is okay not to know. It's okay not to know how it's going to unfold. But can I accompany that not knowing that often happens inside when you're being with someone, even in a conversation? Because it is not humanly possible to know it all. There has to be a space for the unknown within us and within the other.
I'm just using you as an example, Monica, now. But my inner Monica, I'm developing an inner Monica. I'm developing an inner everybody. But my inner Monica is saying, yes, but in certain situations, you have to stand against things. You can't just put something aside for the connection. You have to stand up for things, and you have to stand against things that you think are really destructive. And
I agree with
and
100% agree.
you agree with, yes, you agree with that?
Yes.
But that's all.
Have to have heard I do. I just don't want to belong to a club where there's a strict list of opinions or a litmus test. I just want to be sure that we're not building that.
Absolutely. We're trying to build a club where all of the complexity and all of the nuance and all of the individuality make up this us. And there are lots of differences. And somebody said that facts are either right or wrong, but truths, you can have contradictory truths that fill each other out in strange ways, and we have to make room for all of the deeper truths, which is different than accepting opinions. You don't have to accept opinions that you don't accept, but to make room for the deeper truths of all of us, a reservoir that's deep enough and broad enough that can contain that. I think that's what our goal is. There's an idea in nonlinear systems theory or complexity theory that goes very, very well with Jean's philosophy. And the idea is that a system is self-generating when it hovers around the tipping point between chaos and rigidity. And when we listen to the conversation as a whole, we could see how we're moving together. We don't want the too much chaos where everybody's fighting with each other, or the way that the social political situation usually is. We don't want the rigidity where everybody has to agree to the same rules and the same ideas. And we're hovering around this tipping point where the system, and this theory is about stars and all kinds of other systems, but it is our human system, where our human system can be self-generating. So have a wonderful couple of weeks, and let us hear from you about any reflections you have about this session. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.